Welcome to the Four Rooms podcast, where we explore the four rooms of entrepreneurship: health, wealth, scale, and relationships. Each episode is dedicated to opening new doors and uncovering insights that empower you to design your entrepreneurial journey to be both lucrative and fulfilling. And now, your hosts, Amber Spears and Brett Kaufman.
Welcome to the Four Rooms podcast. I am your host, Amber Spears, and I'm here with Dimitri Lianoudakis. Dimitri, you've become one of my favorite members. We have pictures of all of our members, and we go through them before the events. And there are certain ones that stick out so much because of their kindness, generosity of spirit, authenticity. I think we've done a really good job cultivating that. But in my mind, you're one of those people that I always hold and say, if I could have, 100 more Dimitris, I think we would be a much better and stronger group overall. So just really appreciate you, second year member. It's a delight to have you. I don't know if you're just so kind because you're Canadian or like what. But, it's a complete delight. And I'm excited to chat with you today about yourself and about your company, Ecom Risk Heroes. I just think you have a really cool business. I think that's one of the coolest parts about kind of being the glue that holds together Four Rooms and all the work I've done in my past with, affiliate and creator marketing is I get a chance to look at a lot of different businesses and learn about a lot of different models. And yours is a really interesting one for me. So I'd love to have, your wisdom, your knowledge imparted on anyone listening. And, would just love to learn, more about you. How'd you get into it? What's your story? What's a problem that Ecom Risk Heroes helps to solve? It's something that I think every single business owner needs to pay attention to because we all take credit cards, right? Unless you're a drug dealer or maybe you're selling peptides or marijuana or something. But this is super, super important. We could not have a business without it. So would just love to, hear you impart your wisdom. So let's hear a little bit about you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great being part of this mastermind. My business has, I consider myself a relationship person. This is how I grow. This is how I enjoy doing business in person as much as possible, especially in this AI era. So the more in-person meetups we can do, and I think you fostered a great group of people. So I appreciate that. I thank you for doing that. And obviously, thank you for allowing me to enter this community. So, it's definitely a double win for me on that scenario. Yeah. So let me, I'll jump into it. High level, we help online businesses turn payment processing from a hidden liability into a profit center. Right. So what does that mean is essentially we help build smart payment systems, or I should say smarter payment systems. Simply speaking, this means improving your approval rate. So fewer good customers get declined and they get the product that you're trying to sell them, right? We lower unnecessary payment processing costs, which essentially converts back to cash flow. And we reduce the risk that comes with weak or insufficient payment processor setups, right? So think of no backup systems, think of choosing the wrong payment processor, right? So a lot of businesses are focused on generating demand in terms of, think of it customers, think of it impressions, right? Anything that kind of follows pre-purchase. They don't realize how much money and stability they're losing on the back end. And that's the gap essentially that we help to fix. If you're already doing that, right, which I think a lot of your listeners are already in that demand phase, right? They built businesses, they're generating significant amount of volume in terms of customers, right? So the next smart place to look at essentially is your infrastructure behind that scale. Because if the front end is working, even small improvements in the payment system essentially can have huge impacts in revenue, profit, and stability. So that's essentially what we're doing right now, what we've been doing the last couple of years.
What got you into this? I'm really curious.
So it's funny. I started in internet marketing back in 2012. I was really fortunate enough to work for a very, very smart internet marketer who basically took me under his wing, and I started as an analyst, right? I'm a stats guy. In a previous life, I was a quant for a small hedge firm. I have a master's in math. So a lot of stuff, but didn't do much with it at the time, right? And then I'm like, hey, e-commerce, what is that, right? So I got into that world, more than, 13, 14 years ago. And we were basically running free trial offers, right? Selling ebooks and NF. Free trial back then was a very different space, a little bit of black hat, I'm not going to lie. And we were really heavy on optimization, on split testing. So I kind of took my background, ran a really great CRO department that made us a lot of money. That got me involved in different areas like affiliate management, payment systems, essentially funnel optimization. And, I kind of moved slowly throughout the ranks and eventually ended up managing one of their core companies out of the Caribbean for a couple of years. That was really great business-wise, professionally and personally as well. Just great living on an island. I'm not going to lie. We built that business to about 9 figures a year. And, one day I come to the office, I do my same routine that I do every single day. I look at, hey, what were my stats yesterday versus the same day the week before? So Monday versus Monday last week. Then I just see flatline. And I'm like, hey, there must be something wrong with our tracking system, right? This is before ClickFunnels and all that, all the great tech that we have now. We built everything in-house, right? So, I thought maybe, there was a developer mistake. Well, I'm seeing the same flat line everywhere. And then I realized that all of our payment processors had shut down our account, right? They had shut down our account. We were, I think, probably about $500,000 in reserves, right? Essentially that we couldn't even touch, and we didn't even know when the money was coming. We were really heavy in running affiliate traffic. So, when you don't have money and you can't pay your affiliates, well, what happens? They jump ship, right? I can't blame them, right? So we tried as much as possible to, hold on to say, no, we're going to get you, right? So we're scrambling to find different money in different areas, and we can transfer that's not going to kind of bite us in the ass down the road. But we lost almost all of it. Right? Yeah, because time is not your friend at this point. So our business essentially almost crumbled overnight. Half my team, I had to let go. And, I sat there saying, I cannot let an entity take my business hostage, because that's essentially what happened, right? It was out of the blue. Yeah, we had a few issues here and there, but it was never like, hey, there was just no heads up. So that kind of was a wake up call. Yeah, no warning, no nothing, right? And that basically was a wake up call for me. I then kind of flew around Europe, in North America, to meet with different banks to really understand, like, hey, what's the relationship? How do you view us, right? How do you view these online sellers? What can we do to essentially really become a partner? Because that's what I want in the business, right? And that's sort of been one of my core frameworks and values is like, we want to become a partner with our clients in their business, right? We want to be able to help them, right? And it's the same thing with payment processing. And, once I realized how this works, right? And how do we stay compliant, right? How do we share information such that if there's an issue, right, they're not just going to, basically throw us out the gate or something, you know what I mean? So that really helped me understand the relationship and the process, but especially how to keep an eye on some of your core stats, right? So then what I realize is, this is essentially almost like a conversion problem, right? When you're trying to optimize an ad or optimize a funnel, what do you do? You have certain KPIs that you're looking at ad hoc, EPC, CTR, all these things. And you're saying, okay, are they in the acceptable range? Does it make sense? Should I pour money or should I stop and pivot? Well, it's the same thing with payment processing, right? And once I figured out those metrics and that relationships and how to leverage it, that's when we started using and leveraging it as a cash flow operation rather than something that's just a utility, essentially.
How do you turn it from, what you'd be looking at, in the P&L, it's just like merchant processing fees or refunds, chargebacks. Like, how do you turn it into a profit center? Is it because you're saving the business a lot more money and more charges are getting through, like less refunds? Like, can you just kind of give me a clear picture on that particular statement that you made?
So we essentially look at it as a framework. I look at the business in 3 specific areas. The first one we look at is we want to essentially approve more payments. At the end of the day, what that means is I want to remove friction from your customers during the checkout process, whether that's online, by email, over the phone, right? So we're essentially reducing unnecessary declines so more customers can actually get what you're selling them, right? They want it. Right. So we want to remove that barrier that's causing them to get declined. That's number one. So that think of it under front end sales, think of it from your upsells or anything you do on the back end, whether it be subscription or high ticket. The second tier that we do is we look at your payment processing costs. We look at your history. How much have you been processing? What's your expected run rate in the next, 2, 3, 6 months? And we say, are you paying, what you ought to be paying given the volume that you're doing? Right? Because there's always room to negotiate. There's always room to do better. And sometimes a 10, 15% drop in payment fees without changing anything else in your business is essentially free cash flow back into your business, right? It can pay for a team of VAs. It can pay, depending on how much volume you're doing, that could be significant savings. And then on the third side that we do is around reducing our risk is, hey, are any of these processors holding reserves? Should they be holding reserves in the first place? Right? Do you have delay in funding, delay in payments, right? Any type of what I call processor related instability, right? We want to remove that risk, because at the end of the day, one thing we always ask is if the processor were to shut you down today for whatever reason, how quickly can you continue business, right? How quickly can you get back to business as usual? right? And that's a really big thing for us, right? So it really comes down to improving revenue, protecting your margin, and reducing your risk.
That's awesome. I know we've talked about this before, but for anyone listening, you're not a merchant processor. You work
Yeah,
with companies
correct.
with merchant processors, so you're almost like agnostic, right? But I like that about you because it means you can work with anyone. Financial stuff as a business owner. I think a lot of times you're like, oh, well, I'm on go high level. Migrating it to something else is like it's such a bear. I don't care what they say, like, oh, it's going to be easy. We're gonna like, it's never easy, right? And so I think like hearing you, what's cool about this is that you can come in, as an advisor to these different businesses, and when you say, hey, this might not be the right processor for you, let's just say that you're processing on peptides and you're on Stripe, it's probably not a good idea for you to be doing that.
Exactly.
Period. The end. Right. So let me tell you the risk because I'm not, I'm agnostic, and here are the ones that could work a little bit better for you. So I just want to make that point that it's not just that you're processing, you help companies improve their overall margin, and processing is a part of that in terms of that recommendation. I also want to clarify another point. I know your name is Ecom Risk Heroes, but you also work with every type of business, right? As long as they're doing online marketing, is that the kind of current silver thread through that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely a little bit misleading on that business part. I know we've spoken about that in the past as well. But yeah, absolutely. Our primary audience, essentially is anybody who's, processing, on the low side, let's say 70, 80,000 a month and then upwards, whether they're doing e-com, or traditionally, if you're running some sort of multi-step funnel, right, with upsells or downsells or anything on the back end, that is where most of the money can be made. Most of your profit can be made. And that's usually in the direct to consumer space. That could be in the health and wellness, in biz op, in consulting, coaching, anything around that niche, essentially peptides, anything around that niche essentially is where we can help.
Cool. That's helpful. I just want to make sure anyone listening knows that it's, first of all, you're having a math wizard look at all your stuff, which I think is always should lead with that. This is the first time I've heard you say that. And I was like, oh, it makes sense.
Thank you. Good
Like,
idea.
it makes a lot of sense, dude. You have
So I knew that master's in math was going to be useful at some point,
Half the entrepreneurs I know really struggle with numbers, myself included. I never learned math, so I was homeschooled. But I think like that's it's such an important point. And when you're talking to business owners who are listening, or anyone in four rooms, or anyone that you're working with, is like that agnostic kind of frame, with your math background and your banking background. It's a triple threat, so I think that's an important thing to draw out. I'm really curious. Like, I've heard so many horror stories. I mean, myself included. I had a reserve issue myself, which was really frustrating. The worst one that we ever had was when we were still Mimosa Mastermind, and we did an event, and we had obviously the spike in revenue because we're selling tickets to the next year. Spikes up, and our merchant processor was there. So they were sponsoring us and they were there. Sales spiked up. And then we were told that they're going to hold that in reserve for like 60 days. And we're like, dude, that's like, we need that money for like deposits for the hotel for next year. You're literally there in the room, like watching us process. So, this isn't like a scam. But what ended up happening is like, I guess what had happened with the bank is that they came and looked at our website, and we didn't have the dates for the following year set up on our website already. So they were like, oh, these people just sold a bunch of stuff. I'm looking and they don't have any events next year. So what are they selling tickets for? So it's just a really interesting dynamic. They held like, I think it was like 80 or 90 grand. And we're like, what? We needed that like in reserve. We're literally counting on that to put deposits down. So expensive, So it's been, we have had our own horror stories. And I've seen so many people get their funds held by Stripe. And then, I'm curious on like, there's two scenarios that I hear quite often. Is one, they held a bunch of money in reserve and they don't know when they're going to get it back. So that's one. And then two, I've heard of them just shutting down the account completely. And then they just start refunding all your customers. And it's like, okay, well, what do you do in these scenarios?
You're absolutely right. It essentially falls usually in those two buckets, right? And, I'll often get asked, hey, are you against Stripe or do you not use it? And I am not in any which way against Stripe, right? And to your point, we're payment processor agnostic, right? So a big part of our business, or, we have a team where all we do day in, day out is we split test different payment processors for different verticals, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to put the best processor for your business, for your acquisition model. Now, that might be Stripe, right? It might be Stripe. It may not be, but what I tell, regardless of who you're using, right? we're essentially building a payment. You have to think of it as a system. If one part of that system, one module breaks, well, does your whole system break, right? Like if one funnel goes down, does your whole business stop, right? You have backups, right? You have other assets. So it's the same type of thinking that we're trying to put in payment process. And it's usually when your account starts underperforming, when your fees feel a little bit too high, where your cash flows a bit tighter, where you're seeing less revenue come in, but you're making more sales, right? That's usually kind of telltale warning signs as to what you should do, right? Where there might be some instability, coming down the road. Hopefully, you'll see those signs before coming, to that scenario. And Stripe, like I tell people, it's a great barrier to entry. It allows you to take an idea from, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to build something, right? Especially now with AI, right? I can build it in a day and I want to test right now. And great. I do that. I recommend that. You should definitely do that. But as a long-term scale partner, there are too many unknowns to be able to say, hey, I'm comfortable having, selling subscriptions where I might have, 100, 200, 300 people on subscriptions in Stripe. And then all of a sudden, Stripe might come back for that specific vertical. They may have gotten notification from the card brands like Visa, MasterCard, say, hey, you know what? We're getting too many issues with these verticals. Can you pause that for a while? Which in Stripe means you have to shut these people down. And then you're stuck. And then you have all these rebills, all these horror stories, right? Like, back to what you're saying, where people are on these cycles and they're never going to get their money, right? That merchant, that owner is never going to get that rebill money. It's gone forever. So, we essentially say, hey, if you're going to use it strategically. Use it for something on the back end, like a high ticket sale, right? For a customer who's already purchased something on the front end, who's more comfortable with that business, who's more comfortable with that product, is less likely they're ever going to either refund or dispute the transaction, right? But either way, Stripe should be one in many sort of processors that you have under your system.
How many processors do you recommend that people have? Does it depend on the volume that they're doing?
Exactly. I would say it depends on the volume. It depends on, how many purchase points are in your funnel, right? So think of front end, how many upsells do you have and how many downsells do you have? And also the vertical that you're in, right? So peptides right now is a very, sort of hot topic, right? So it's hasn't been marginalized yet, right? So that is a vertical where, hey, things might change really fast usually with little warning, right? So I always tell people 2-3 is the standard.
It's good to know. I'm already thinking about mine. I'm like, all right, we need at least another one.
I know a guy.
Yeah, I know exactly. We need to do that. But yeah, it's super helpful, man. I'm just I think it's so cool, like how you're able to work with all these different people. I'm really curious. Like, do you have some like examples off the top of your head, like either horror stories, some of the worst things you've ever seen, or you know, examples of how you've come in and helped people, save money or get more sleep at night and feel like they, they're protecting their sanity and their business. I'd be really curious to hear some of those from you.
Absolutely. A horror story was actually a friend of mine from another mastermind. He had hit me up. He basically was selling real estate courses. He's a real estate investor, very successful one, great guy, gives a ton of free advice. And, he's been selling through Stripe for years. And a lot of them are as part of a coaching or courses. So it's a recurring membership, essentially, a recurring subscription. Yeah. And, essentially Stripe overnight, they basically said, hey, we cannot support your business anymore. You are not allowed to process any payments as of today. And then we're holding your reserves indefinitely. So you're holding your funds in reserves. So he had something like $100,000, right, in future rebills. And it was just like devastating. And when I mean devastating, I mean his business never recovered, right? Mm-hmm. So that was something that, we got him set up. But at that point, right, and that's why I tell people, like, don't wait for that point, right? Look at your payment systems now. Look at what, and ask, where is all my money located? And if today that specific processor or bank or whatever went down, how quickly can I recover, right? And unfortunately for him, it was really difficult, right? It's like essentially starting from scratch because you can't do anything. That's one story I always tell because it's a legitimately great business that provides a lot of value to the customer, probably way more than what they're paying for. And it's like the life was sucked out of it. And it is just really, really disappointing. The other thing is you don't know what you don't know, right? And I always, when I'm introduced to somebody or when, I'm thinking about working with somebody, we always do like an audit, right? And I feel like that's like the best way to kind of look at everything is say, hey, let me look at your systems. And oftentimes, the business owner might think, hey, you know what? I think, our biggest issue right now is we're paying high fees. And then we'll take a deeper look. And yes, maybe there might be something we have to do with fees. But then on the other side is just, you're losing a whole bunch of transactions, a whole bunch of revenue. you're trying to sell, people aren't buying. You have nothing that's telling you, that's signaling, hey, heads up, this customer tried to purchase the first upsell, it failed. They tried to purchase a second one, it failed too. And you're just leaking a ton of revenue, right? And so a lot of the aha moments come from just not even realizing how much revenue or extra revenue can be made by paying attention to that specific part of the business. And I find as marketers, we're very, very focused on growing, right? Sales and marketing never dies, right? That's just the way it is. And I understand it for myself as well. But retention and revenue retention should play a significant role in operations.
100%. I'm really curious, in the example you gave before of your friend that had all these rebills on Stripe, if he had a second merchant processor in place, would that have solved that issue? Can you easily port over rebills to this next, merchant processor without kind of any issue? Or do you have to ask your end customer, hey, we need you to fill out your credit card information again, which then obviously a lot of them are not going to want to do?
Absolutely. So the short answer is depends, right? With Stripe, I think in all the years that I've been doing this, I think I've maybe successfully done it twice where they
Wow.
basically, unlocked and said, hey, sure, you can move your rebills to somewhere else, right? But
It's
it is
horrible.
horrible,
God.
right? You're not even sure if you're speaking to a human. That's number one, right? Number one is you're not really sure if you're actually speaking to somebody, right? Now, most other processors will have a system set up where, yes, you can do that. And I recommend if you're on subscriptions, if you are using subscriptions, and if you have to use Stripe, I get it fine, but I would not put all my eggs in that basket, right? I would much rather put subscriptions elsewhere. But the most important thing is transparency. Have that open and honest conversation with your payment processor. Hey, maybe that when you initially signed up, you were not running subscription. And this, we see this often. Then they start running subscriptions, and then that's when they run into a few issues. And then their payment processor, hey, what's going on? Well, we're doing this, but you never told us, right? So having that open line of communication, saying, hey, heads up, we would like to do this. We're thinking of running subscriptions in the next, month or so. Are you guys okay with that? Do you need anything from us, to basically enable it, to be okay with it, right? And it's just a small conversation can have such a huge impact, a positive impact on your business, on its stability, and on its revenue.
I'm really curious on why these businesses hold things in reserve. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about Stripe, but I have heard from other kind of smaller merchant processors that they hold things in reserve because they basically are responsible for who they process with.
Exactly.
Like, is that the
Yeah.
case? Like,
Yeah. So, they're basically underwriting the risk, right? So it's like,
yeah.
I tell people it's like when you go to the bank, let's say you're looking for your first home or your second home or your third home, you're going to the bank for a loan. What are they going to do? They're going to look at you from a fiscal perspective, right? Who is this person? What do they do? Do they have a say job, their credit score? Do they have any liquidity, right? They're going to go through some sort of checklist. And then they're going to say, am I comfortable giving Amber Spears $1 million, essentially? That's what they're saying in a nutshell. Am I confident that she will, I'll get that return back somehow? Well, it's the same thing for payment processing, right? They look at your business, they look at what you're selling, who you're selling it to, how you're selling it to the different acquisition channels. And they think, are we comfortable underwriting that risk if things go south? Right? That's number one, right? That's the first thing any good payment processor ought to do, because essentially that gives you as the business owner peace of mind and think, oh yes, this payment processor has worked with businesses like myself. So that's great. That's a really good relation. That's a really good start to a relationship, right? The second thing why they often will hold reserves is if your business grows beyond the initial projections that you have given them. When you provide that information, hey, we're probably going to process, 50,000 a month. And that's, that's usually the standard thing. And then, if you go in 1 month from 50 to 150, it's like, whoa, that's a huge jump, right? And that's great because for you as a business owner, you're like, wow, well, whatever I'm doing, it's working. But from a bank's perspective or a processing perspective, and you can think of processor and bank as almost one and the same. And at the end of the day, banks are risk averse. They do not like risky things. They want to bet on sure, predictable things. So when they see somebody who's been like this and then who's jumped, by 150%, it's like, whoa, that is a big signal. Right? Is that going to happen again? Or is the inflection point going to go downwards? So for them, they want that stability. That's why a very, very big thing is constantly being proactive. Say, hey, heads up, I believe this month we're going to double our volume. Is that okay? Are we cleared for that? Is there anything you need from us? It could be hey, how are you gonna manage your refunds, an increase in refunds? How are you gonna manage an increase in disputes, right? All of these, what I call them very back-end, very operational stuff, but they're so important because they keep that line of communication open, right? So half my job, I tell people, is just relationships. It's just talking to people, right? Letting them know what's going on. And when you do that, your risk exposure, it gets cut in half, if not more.
That's so interesting, man. I'm learning a lot on this. By the way, I have a question for you about the kind of current state of the economy. The Iran war is happening. We've got all of this, there's still really stuff happening all over the world, the Middle East, Ukraine. It looks like we're going to have, continued high oil prices and all this stuff that ends up squeezing consumers. I'm hearing from, my friends that are in like e-commerce, a little stressed, anybody that kind of deals with consumers, a little stressed. Anyone that's doing AI is like making money hand over fist, right? So they're crypto bros are a little down right now. There's a lot going on in the world.
Yeah.
But are you starting to see, any rippling effects in the businesses that you're seeing across the board, particularly with like subscription? I would assume that those would be some of the things that are kind of taking a hit in addition to some of the front end, buying. Are you seeing anything like that across the board yourself? And if so, what are you seeing? And what are some of the things that you and your clients are doing to kind of mitigate that?
That's a great question because, current events always have an impact downstream, right? So I'm seeing a few things. I'm seeing two things. I am seeing that the overall risk appetite is tightening up. So I'm seeing businesses who in the past have, they've had a couple of chargebacks here and there, but, nothing too severe, right? They've been within the range that the processor is comfortable with. And I've seen them now, those same processors come back to those same businesses and say, hey, your chargeback's a little bit too high. Like, what's going on? We need a remediation plan and we need it now. So there's that tightening of risk that's happening. It could be happening from just the quality is going down, right? Because the costs are going up. So, you have that diminishing margins, right? So everyone's trying to cut corners here and there. So that's one thing. I'm seeing risk kind of go up. It's getting tightened a little bit. The second thing I'm seeing, especially on front ends, on the transaction level, is we're seeing a lot more lower ticket items get declined. So that kind of tells you the flow of liquidity or of money, right? It's just people are more cash tight. We're getting a lot of those higher declines, right? We're getting more of those insufficient funds. It's a bad thing because, right, it's hard to get that product to your customer. It's a good thing for us because it's essentially forcing us to be, all right, well, how do we fix this problem, right? It's a good, because that's what entrepreneurs want. They want to fix problems, right? So it's like, okay, well, how do I get in front of this now? And how do I make this better? So it's forcing us to look at everything, all of our data, right? We have access to hundreds of thousands of millions of transactions. And it's for us to figure out, how do we solve this problem? But I am seeing, especially on that side of things, where it's getting harder. And what a lot of people are doing is they're moving towards, or they're not moving towards, but they're also offering financing as an option. Right?
Yeah,
so
like
I'm seeing a lot more.
like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of people even do that on the front end, right? Because they're trying, and I get it. You're trying to make that sale to get that, especially if it's a self-liquidating offer on the front end, right? You're trying to get that margin up front. And, they're using these buy now, pay later options. The only thing I tell people about that is just make sure to read the terms, right? Understand how you get paid.
So expensive. Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
They take a 15% plus off the top and you're like, dang.
So
and then they tell you they're going to give it to you immediately. And you're like, wait a minute. Every time I read it, it's not true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that makes sense from what I'm hearing. It's interesting to see it from your perspective when you're looking at all these transactions. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I'm curious too, like in subscriptions in particular, and this is just for me or anybody that does kind of like high ticket stuff. What are you seeing in terms of like, let's say a customer signs a contract to be a part of a community or to be a part of coaching, whatever, and they start falling off on their payments, and you guys have a binding contract on that. How do you go about collecting that? And from a merchant processor perspective as well, right? Like, how does that work?
That's great because, a lot of people are, I feel like there's a very subscription heavy economy right now, or a lot of people
100%.
are trying to get into at least the subscription heavy. And I think it's great because obviously LTV pays off. I always tell people it's never just a merchant processing problem. It's usually a business communication problem at the same time. When there is some sort of agreement, and there ought to be, right? If you have a binding agreement, even if it's just a signature or verbally, then, there's this extra layer of, okay, from the customer, I need to get this done. I've signed this. I've agreed to it, right? And then from that perspective, when we see those rebills or subscription, payment 1 or payment 2 kind of fall off on the payment processing side, we build redundancy systems, right? Where we retry it on different processors. You can retry it first of the month, 15th of the month, or 30th of the month, kind of coincide around paydays. Anything that we can do on our end to essentially get that extra lift, right, to get it successful. At the same time, what we're doing is we tell businesses, hey, speak to your customers, reach out to them regularly, especially if it's in the coaching space. Why have they dropped off? Is the coach doing everything in their ability, right? That accountability coach, if there is one, to basically go out to that person, hey, how can I help you? Are you struggling? And most of the time, they're just struggling and they have no way to articulate that message. And when you get that message across, then it comes into payment plans, right? You can build out a more comfortable payment plan for them, split it out in the longer term, maybe use a financing at that point, right? There's different levers you could put, but I always say it's a combination of great communication, not just good communication, but like great communication where you're really leaning in with empathy. And then it's, okay, how do I, on the business side, on the processing side, how do I make this machine work to squeeze as much money as I can to get that sale?
Let's say that they need to go to collections. Do you play any role in anything like that, like in handling that?
Collections, no, we don't really, we don't really touch that. We try to look at, I tell people who are in that space, if you're in coaching, kind of understand what your numbers are is, hey, where does that drop off happen? Because the numbers aren't going to lie, right? If I sign up somebody and if I send 100 people and I realize that after month 4, more than half of them, I can't recuperate payment. They haven't actually verbally told me that they don't want it anymore, but their credit card has been blocked, right? Right.
Yeah.
So there's something going on at that point in time of coaching where we're losing them. Right. So there's some sort of, so I thought, we look at that data and it's like, hey, well, what's going on? Right. Have the touch points dropped? Are they just not doing the work? Right. So there's so much we can do just by communicating, getting on the phone, getting by email. Right. I know we're in the whole area of AI and automations, and it's great. It really is for a big part of the business. It is great. But, for me, and I think you can empathize with this, is just talking to someone, like listening to them and listening to their problems, and then seeing how can I help this person. It's invaluable, right? And it's the same thing with your customers who are on that subscription. Sometimes they just want that. Hey, I want to continue, but I just can't do it right at this current, at this current payment. Can we figure something out? And almost always the answer is yes.
Super helpful, dude. I've already learned so much in this. I'm sure people are hearing this and like, damn, this guy's a genius. Like, what would it be like to have him work with me? How do you like work with people? Is it like a month to month? Is it like an audit? Is it like, you're part of their team? Like, how does that kind of work in terms of working with you directly?
It's like you said, literally all of the above,
Okay.
right? We come in, first thing we always do is we come in with a free audit. There's a questionnaire, type form questionnaire, just so I can get a bit of the lay of the land, just get an idea of sort of where you fall to qualify you, of course, because if I can't help you, that way we're not wasting each other's time. Yeah, but more importantly, we kind of go in there, we see what there is. At the end of the day, I'll give a good chunk of advice, right? Now, whether you decide to work with me or not, obviously that depends on you, but I want to at least leave you with something actionable that you can either do yourself or through somebody else. But at the very least, my whole goal is I want to make you money or save you money. So that's the first thing. That's our first step. We do that through a free audit. And then if that works, if we jive, if we can continue together, then it's just month to month. And I literally, like you said, I become an extension of the team. Is because one of the things that I'm very vocal about is, hey, add me to your Slack channel, bring me up to speed with everything that you're doing. If you're running a new upsell, if you're changing your funnel, right? The more, I'm in the business of information, and the more information I have, the better I can serve you and the higher the ROI can be.
So interesting, man. I love your business model. It's so important. It's almost like you're an advocate, like in between the banks and the processors, even the customer. Like I think it's a really cool position that you're in. If people want more information, they want to do that free audit, do they go to like ecomriskheroes.com? Do you have an email you'd like to share? Like,
they can go directly to my landing page, ecomriskheroes.com, and there's a free audit button, and it'll basically goes to a calendar link, and you can book a call with me directly. Email Dimitri@ecomriskheroes.com. You can find me on Facebook, on Instagram. Yeah, any which way. You can WhatsApp me.
Awesome. I
Any
love
which way.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's great, man. Last question for you. How do you think the future of payments might be changing with all this blockchain technology and like crypto? Are you kind of playing in that world too? Is it something you don't recommend yet for kind of business owners? What's your thought around that?
Yeah. So in no way, shape, or form am I a crypto expert. I
But
that's
you
one
know
thing, right?
math.
So
Just kidding.
I know a little bit of it. Yeah. So it's I'm very big. I've always been and I do this with investing too. If I can't understand it, or if I have a hard time understanding it, and I have a hard time explaining it to somebody, then I'll never recommend it. And it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that because of I can't fully articulate it, because I can't fully kind of break it down in my head, then I can't in good conscience or in good faith recommend something. So I'm not saying it's not an option. People do that all the time. They use, through blockchain network, right? It's very lucrative. What I'm seeing on my end though, when it comes to payment processing, what I think is that it's just going to become a lot easier, right? So there's a lot of platforms that are competing with Stripe right now. There's a lot of other platforms that are just making it a lot simpler. And I think where they're starting to realize, Stripe's global market is starting to realize, okay, well, we have other competitors that are kind of up and coming now, right? And, we're going to see a shift in this market where, hey, actually speaking to somebody, right? Speaking to a payment provider, having that account manager or having that person is going to be so valuable that you're going to have less businesses falling into these traps of funds frozen, of reserves, right? Because you have a lot of these up and coming payment processors or payment partners that are capitalizing, they're jumping on that model right now, right? And I think that, we're in a time where it's great to be in that space, right? So I think it's just going to become a lot easier. And you don't really need to kind of suffer. You know what I mean? You don't have to kind of go through like, hey, all of my Stripe accounts got shut down. No, there are other options that you can do, right? So I think we're in a really, really great time right now.
It's so cool. I love your optimism. As always, I just love chatting with you, Dimitri. You're an absolute gem. I feel very fortunate that you are a roomie, and excited to see you in a few
Appreciate
weeks
it.
at our next event. But I learned a lot, dude. This was super fun. It's hard to make payment processing fun, but you have accomplished it.
Yeah.
So it was a really great talk, super informative. And I'm really excited for, everyone who listens to this to learn from you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for giving me the time. Appreciate it. I love being part of your network, your group, and everything that you're doing, and whoever's listening. Honestly, this is the place to be. And I'm just so blessed to have been introduced to you, Amber, and the rest of the team. And I'm a big advocate, and I just love what you're doing.
Thank you, my friend. It means so much to me. I appreciate you. All right, guys, we'll talk soon.
As we wrap up today's episode, we have something special just for you. If you've been inspired by what we've explored today and you're ready to take your learning to the next level, then our 4 Rooms Mastermind live event is the perfect next step. And because you're a part of our podcast family, we're offering an exclusive 10% discount on your registration when you apply and are accepted. This is your chance. It's your chance to build relationships with other ambitious entrepreneurs like yourself, to dive deeper into the 4 rooms of entrepreneurship, and to connect with experts who can truly help accelerate your growth. Simply follow the event link in the description of this episode and use the promo code 4rooms10. That's FOURROOMS10 on your application to claim this opportunity. This offer is subject to application approval and it's limited, so don't wait too long to make your decision. Join us and transform your journey with the insights and networking that only our live events can offer. Thank you for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you at the event and, of course, right back here next time on the 4 Rooms podcast. Until then, keep balancing and keep growing.